It is 8:40. I'll call the administrative session of the State Human Rights Committee meeting to come to order. And the first thing we'll do is introductions, starting with the members of the committee. I am John Barrett, Chair, Richmond Deltaville. Will
Childers, Roanoke area.
David
Bain. I'm from southwestern Virginia, far southwest. I'm in Marion. Good morning.
Julie
Good morning, everyone. Julie Allen from Leesburg.
Monica
Good morning. I'm Monica Lucas, Region 4, Richmond.
Sandy
I'm Sandy Robbins, representing Southside Virginia, Brunswick County.
Timothy
Timothy Russell, Williamsburg, Virginia. I guess you don't need to know Virginia. I guess we're there. Anyway, Region 5.
Megan
Idiot.
Good morning, folks. My name's Megan SHRC. I am representing Region 4 in Petersburg.
Okay, and Cora will not be with us today. Karen
Good morning, everybody. Karen Taylor with the Office of the Attorney General, Counsel to the Committee.
and members of the Office of Human Rights, starting with Tanika.
Good morning, Tanika Goldman, State Human Rights Director.
Good morning, Mary Claire O'Hara, Associate Director for Facilities for Human Rights.
Good morning, Jennifer Kovac, Associate Director for Community Operations.
Okay,
Good morning, Brandon Rotenberry, Facility Advocate Manager.
Good morning, this is Carrie Flowers, Facility Advocates for Region 4.
Everyone, Carlton Henderson, Training and Development Coordinator.
Clee.
Good morning, I'm Clee Kinsey, Executive Secretary in the Office of Human Rights.
Okay, the next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections, comments?
I move to accept the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So moved. Tanika, information?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. In your packets, we had some really cool information to share. I hope everyone had a chance to see about our Northern Virginia Local Human Rights Committee member, Veronza Kennedy, who also happens to be president and owner of the Alexandria Compounding Pharmacy. She did some really good and important work with getting vaccines to community members and specifically individuals that are receiving services. So we thought that was a really cool opportunity to highlight the good work that's happening in the community from a person that also happens to be serving on a local human rights committee. Also wanted to bring your attention to the exemption that was in your packet. Certainly, the role of the committee is to be notified of the exemption. There's no voting or approval process needed by this committee. In fact, the way exemptions work is it's the decision of the commissioner for a specific group of people, specifically forensic or sexually violent predators. And this is for, well, you're aware of what it's for. It's in your packet. If there are questions or concerns about that, let me know and we can go into executive session to discuss more, but that's in your packet. Also in your packet is a letter from a patient at Central State Hospital. The letter itself is dated with multiple dates, so I wanted to clarify that our office received it March 9th, which was a couple of days after our last meeting, and that's why the committee is receiving it now. I'm not sure if the committee wants to have discussion, but I do think it's worth outlining the reference that the patient made to a recommendation that came up when there was a review of the Central State Hospital variances, specifically the one to the complaint resolution process. As this committee is aware, there is a appeals committee that operates both for BCBR and for Central State Hospital. Central State Hospital refers to it in their variance as the Max Appeals Committee, and this patient is speaking about that and the recommendation at that time to consider having a consumer representative on that subcommittee, which is made up now of the State Human Rights Committee chairperson, State Human Rights Committee vice chairperson, and State Human Rights Director. So that was the information I had, but I did want to bring the letter to the committee's attention to determine if you wanted to have a conversation about that, put that on the agenda, come back and address that. It may also be relevant when you're considering the variance that's coming before you today with BCBR.
Okay, well, maybe address it at that point. I guess we'll wait and see right now. Okay. All right. At this time, I would like to go into executive session for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel. So Will, if you will put us in executive session.
I move that the SHRC go into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A7 for consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we are.
Does each member certify that, to the best of their knowledge, only matters lawfully exempted from meeting requirements?
Well,
yes.
Let's go back into open session and then we'll certify.
Okay.
So I need a motion to go back, to come out of executive session.
Make a motion to come out of executive session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all right, well.
Okay. Does each member certify that, to the best of their knowledge, only matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such matters related to the stated reason for going into closed session were heard, discussed, or considered? I so certify.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
Okay, at this time, we will go into regular session. And the first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the draft minutes. Do I have a motion to accept as written?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second,
A second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next item is FOIA chapter, and I think this is in relation to identifying someone on the committee to be the FOIA officer. We didn't make a decision at the last meeting, and I think we said that we would do it at this meeting. And Karen, chime in if this isn't what this is on the agenda. I think this was the only item that we were going to act on, plus whatever the bylaws subcommittee. They were also going to add something to the bylaws. So does someone want to lead off on this?
I'll go ahead. I think what happened at the last meeting was Karen was talking to us about how we needed a FOIA officer for people to contact someone on the State Human Rights Committee if they needed a Freedom of Information request. And I think the discussion started about having a member of the SHRC designated as the FOIA officer. And then Sandy brought up the idea of maybe having Tanika as the director of the SHRC as the FOIA officer. And I think we discussed the pros and cons back and forth as to, you know, appearance versus utility versus, you know, other things. And I think we were just kind of chewing on that to come back to the meeting here to just kind of review, you know, what we thought the pros and cons were of having SHRC member versus the director as the FOIA officer, and kind of go, and once we were able to finish the debate today and vote on it, then that would go on the bylaws so that we would have something stated. Does that sound correct?
Yes, yes. So
go ahead, David.
That's exactly how I recall it. We're going to have about a 20-30 minute period of debate. Yeah.
So does anyone have a strong opinion one way or the other? Do we want a member of the committee to be the officer, or do we want to let Tanika handle it? Comments?
I have a quick comment, John. My thought really is that it makes sense for Tanika to do it, but I am concerned about the perception of how information is shared with the community, particularly from individuals receiving services. So I wonder if there is a way that we could have a member assigned, understanding that there is the utilization of support from the Office of Human Rights. Just as a means to, you know, alleviate any concern from the community about getting information.
How's everyone feel about that?
Julie, in committee, that makes sense to me. Again, if nothing else, for the perception of that, and perhaps we could assign that to, again, as vice chair, I would be glad to do that, knowing that we're going to coordinate with Tanika for the specifics of it.
I personally think that's an excellent idea for the vice chair to, that's one of the roles of vice chair. I think that's a good idea. Actually, when I reviewed the agenda and saw that again, I thought about that. The vice chair would be a good role for that. So.
If the vice chair is volunteering, that's even better. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm quiet. So.
There you go. Yes.
Any other
kudos.
Any
other questions, comments?
Just have to make sure that if it's the vice chair, that you get some extra training on FOIA, which I'm happy to do for you, and make sure you read through the chapter, and then we'll have to publish your contact information. And it can go through DBHDS, I think, but we have to publish your contact information as the FOIA officer.
Okay.
Here's a question for you I have real quick. As members of the SHRC, would we be eligible for a DBH email that we wouldn't have to put like our personal or other emails out as a member of this committee, so that if we were asked for FOIA requests, it would go through like an official email?
So we do have an SHRC email established. And one of the things I was gonna maybe speak with our IT folks about is this idea of kind of having a link, and the contact information would be behind that. Certainly always trying to protect your PHI, but using the SHRC email along with the chairperson's or the vice chairperson's name, so that folks know who's going to be reviewing that email, and then certainly working along with that person to fulfill any requests. And I think publish, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, is we provide that to like the FOIA council people, but also publish on our website would be sufficient.
Yes.
Okay.
Both of those things. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I just had a question I wanted to ask. Karen, would I be adding this to the bylaws under the duties of the vice chair of the committee?
I think that if you guys think this is a good idea going forward, right, which it sounds like a good idea to me, and you want to, you want to incorporate it into the bylaws so that even when the vice chair changes, they'd still assume those duties. That's the best way to do it. And that's probably a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion that the vice chair of the State Human Rights Committee will be the FOIA officer?
I'll just put the motion in that you just made, John. That's okay.
And I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. All right, the next item is public comment period. Do we have any public comments?
Dawn, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think there was a FOIA related question since we're on this topic. I think that Sandy might have had, and I'll throw it out there for you, Sandy. Sandy's like, did I? When we were discussing this idea of voting, and I remember Karen spoke about how the votes needed to be public and how we document that. And I think specific to when we're doing business for the committee, like nominating officers, how does the committee go about voting for that? And is something like that also need to be recorded?
Do you? Yes, I don't think there's any exception to the requirement that for electronic meetings that votes be actually recorded because you're electing officers or anything like that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just for clarification, recorded, and Tanika, I understand what you're saying again. When we get to the point of the officer subcommittee report and nominations, if we have multiple nominations for a office, I would prefer to do some type of a balloting, written balloting voting process versus voice vote at our next meeting. Is that a possibility?
We did that a couple years ago. We had that very situation, and we did it with index cards. It was handled that way.
But how will we do that Zoom?
I was in the same room, John. How do we do that in multiple locations?
We come down to William and Mary, and
Could it be done privately on the chat, that each person do it privately on the chat?
Let me look again, which I'll do shortly during this meeting when I'm not talking, but my recollection is that when we did it with the index cards and so forth, my recollection is it was the change to the electronic meeting requirements and the ability to have the increased electronic meetings that carried with it a change in votes needing to be recorded in roll call fashion by name. So that's why I'm not sure that we'll be able to do it that way. I understand that it would be more comfortable to find a way where it's not, I voted for this person. And that's why we use the index cards and everything before. I just need to look again at the changes to FOIA and especially the language in the budget pertaining to electronic meetings to see whether we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll let you know today. But I think my recollection is it's that change that made things more complicated.
All right. Carrie, VCBR report.
Are we in public comment?
Oh,
We
yeah.
did that.
We did. Okay. All right. This is VCBR's report for February. Seclusion and restraint. There were 4 physical emergency restraints for the month of February due to aggression, threatening behavior. The restraints last 1 minute or less. There were no injuries to staff or residents. There were 34 transportation restraints were reported for the month of February. The duration for the transportation restraints ranged between 1 hour and 12 minutes and 11 hours and 23 minutes. 8 hours and 6 minutes was a COVID clinic, was a visit to a COVID clinic in Charlottesville. And another restraint for 11 hours and 23 minutes was UVA for antibody infusion for COVID. No resident injuries were reported in the month of February. There were no reports of seclusion for this period. Allegation of abuse and neglect. There were 4 abuse neglect cases, 2 peer-to-peer and 2 verbal for the month of February. There are no substantiated cases. 2 cases are out of compliance for late investigations. Human rights complaints. There were 12 human rights complaints received during this period. There were 11 complaints alleging violations related to treatment with dignity for the month of February. There was 1 complaint alleging a violation related to confidentiality. 3 complaints were reviewed at the director's level and 9 below the director. There was 1 violation under dignity. I think I said Chris case attached, but I didn't see it in the pack, so I think I didn't attach it. But that case was an incident where a barcode was found in the individual's potato tots. So he was given a new serving of potato tots, and what was it? Okay. That's all was said about that incident. The 2 staff confirmed that there was a barcode tag mixed in with his tater tots. Any questions about that?
None.
All right. Okay. I think that was it, other than the construction update. The facility obtained certificates of occupancy for buildings 6 and 7. And due to construction, building 6 will only be used to provide temporary office space to staff. Staff are moving into their temporary workspaces to allow, therefore, better access to begin renovations. Pictures include the new rotunda at the center of BCBR and the skylight that runs down the main corridor once you are past security. This spring, we shall see work in Central Park with the landscaping as they install exterior features to work their way back to the front of the facility. Tours will be offered next month. And I'm assuming next month may mean March or April, I don't know. And that's the end of the report. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We are ahead of schedule. Is Jason available now for the variance?
Saw him earlier. I don't know that I see him on the call yet.
I see his name.
You? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Sorry. Yes, I hear you now.
Just quick on VCBR.
Yeah.
The tours. Who's getting
Okay.
tours next month?
Jason, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
We're ahead of schedule. Are you available to go now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can begin.
Okay. How are y'all? I hope y'all are doing well today. Today, we are presenting a variance request. This is a renewal request. And actually, can I share my screen, Tanika? Am I able to do that?
I think you're able to.
All right. Are y'all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
You are.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the original. I'll just go through the packet that I had submitted to everyone, and we can have a discussion. There are a few things after a discussion with Tanika, I'll pause and we'll have an open discussion. But this is a 3-year variance request. It was April 2018 that you all granted a group of variances for us. and this is the 3-year renewal request for those. The general bucket of variances would include the variance for a separate complaint process that uses the VCBR Appeals Committee, from which some of you are members of, and then a variance for double bunking, and a variance for restrictions, and a variance for rooms with units with medical units with no witness. The complaint variance we can go through pretty quick, and maybe, you know, and address your questions. And then the others, there might need to be some discussion whether or not they're still needed. Tanika and I actually had a conversation that I'm going to withdraw the request for some of those, but I'll provide a brief explanation once we get to those. So we have followed the established processes. They were posted for public comment on the registrar, and also I had submitted some resident comments that I had received. I think it was 3 or 4 I received, and they should be at the end of your packet if you have any questions or want to refer to those. Are y'all ready to get started with the first section, which would include the variance for the complaint procedure?
Yes.
Okay, so the first section or first variance group would be 12 VAC 351, 1550, 175, 180, 190, 200, 210. These are all variances that replace our VCBR complaint procedure with the complaint procedure that is within the regulations. Y'all are likely familiar with the process. I know that Mr. Barrett is a member of the VCBR Appeals Committee. If I could get education on the other members, I'd appreciate that.
Right now, the Appeals Committee is made up of the chair, Mr. Barrett, the vice chair, who's Will Childers, and myself, the State Human Rights Director.
Okay, so thank you all for serving. The variance to the complaint process, it very much mirrors the regulations itself, but it doesn't have an LHRC review, and it doesn't come to the full SHRC. It goes to the subcommittee, which Tanika mentioned those members. So we have a formal complaint form that the resident may submit. It goes to our complaints coordinator, who receives the complaint, classifies the complaint, enters the complaint in CRIS if it's a human rights complaint, and meets with the resident to attempt to resolve the issue. If the resident's not satisfied at that level, the individual may appeal the decision to the director. I or my designee review the complaint. If the resident is still not satisfied and it's a human rights complaint, the appeal is sent to Tanika's office, who coordinates the review of the complaint by the VCBR Human Rights Appeals Committee. It is up to all of you who serve as members of those committees. So that's up to the SHRC, is my understanding. We don't appoint those members. I've provided the complaint process for you all. It's been in effect for approximately 10 years. Was there any questions about that process?
Any questions from the members?
No.
I'll defer to you all on how you want to handle. If you want me to skip to the next section, or if y'all want to discuss this specific variance request, or if I need to provide additional information.
What's the desire of the committee?
I think if it's been working and you guys have, I know we've been working for quite a while to go ahead and make things, you know, smooth so that it works for both parties as we move forward. So it seems to me we've evolved over some time to go ahead and find something that's working. And I know that John, you spent a lot of time with Jason, and Jason, you spent a lot of time with our committee trying to figure out what's the most efficient and best route for both sides of this. And so I've been okay with it. because I've seen how we've moved through the years to get to a point where we're both sides are comfortable with where we're going with this. So, and I know that John and Tanika and Jason are in fairly constant dialogue about how things are working, or if something's coming up, you present something to the committee before it happens. So I'm okay with so far with what you presented as having the SHRC as the committee.
Yeah,
And I am of the opinion that if it's not broke, we don't have to fix it.
and I'm good with that too. Somewhere in the past, this had been brought up as well. On the policy that's on the screen right now, with A saying that each resident's going to be informed upon admission how to utilize the complaint process. I believe that there's probably a lot of things going on, and at the time of admission, a lot of information being provided and exchanged, and maybe not a lot being retained by the individuals because of their emotional state of being sent to VCBR. My only concern is just if informally, perhaps even, that I don't know how to actually try to, this would be met, but if the advocate or the individual assigned to that facility could periodically try to ensure that the residents there are aware of the process. I mean, I know a number of them are very aware because of the number of complaints that they've filed before. But you know, I just know a lot of information is provided at the time of intake, and I want to make sure that everybody is made aware and understands it.
I kind of echo what she's saying there. I'm used to a policy with this is that it's sometimes reviewed annually with the residents, just so some sort of way to make sure that they saw it again. Because from my experience in working with two facilities, both Department of Behavioral Health where I worked and corrections, a lot of times the residents did not comprehend all the information thrown at them at one time. So I kind of just to be sensitive of that, maybe even something like an annual review or an annual reminder or something like that would take care of that.
And it could be documented at the time of the annual review by the treatment team.
Yes.
And that way you've got the documentation, and I think it protects human rights as well.
Yeah.
Both of those are very good comments. I'll speak really quickly to the comment about at admission. I agree that at admission is a fairly hectic time, moves pretty quick. At our agency, how we address admissions and not just for the resident complaint process, but orientation for all admissions. We put new admissions in a specific treatment group that's headed by our clinical director. And the purpose of that group is to engage the individual early and recognizing the need for therapeutic contact. But also what the clinical director does is it meets obviously daily, 4 days a week, but she has her piece discussing treatment, but also she daily brings in specific departments to discuss processes within the facility. So for example, one day she has the meal staff come in and talk about meal procedures. She has food services staff come in and talk about food services. For this policy, she has the human rights, our complaint coordinator come in, review the complaint process and go through the process with the residents and address it, receive a copy of the policy and make sure they know how to address the issue. So that's one way we handle new admissions. I'll take the suggestion about the annual review of the complaint process back to our compliance director with that recommendation. We do under human rights regulations, we review the rights of individuals with them annually. So we can add this to the packet to assure that they're knowledgeable of the complaint process.
Thank you for considering that. And then the only follow-up on that is, if it's documented in some sort of form or something that's been done, I think it goes for a long ways. And if there is a complaint by a resident that they've had this list of where they've been notified and they signed off on it or whatever, that I think it helps with allegations in the future. That's just my thoughts from my experience.
Very good point. I agree. We've always found it best that if you get a John Hancock on a form, you can point back to it and say that this is reviewed. Thank y'all for the feedback on that. Would y'all like me to go to the next few, which have some likely some more discussion?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
One add-on on that one, if you don't mind, Jason. I'm also used if they refuse to sign, there's a place where the staff could put down that they refuse to sign, but the information was provided anyway. So that way you've got covered up both ways, because I understand your population totally.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I also wanted to bring back to the committee's attention that this is the specific variance where there is the appeals committee and there's been the recommendation to have a consumer representative. Part of that recommendation also included the committee considering the representation of a person with lived experience who was a committee member joining the existing appeals committee and also the existing maximum security appeals committee. So we mentioned this earlier, and I just kind of wanted to bring it back to the forefront since this is the variance that it applies to.
And this variance would be approving that addition of a person with lived experience on those review councils?
So my understanding is that you would be approving the variance the way it was written, and then certainly, Karen, jump in if I'm wrong, you could say, we also make the additional recommendation that it's reviewed annually, right? That's one of the things we just talked about. And then also that the actual appeals committee will now include, in addition to the existing members, a consumer representative who is a member of the SHRC.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can modify, one of the things you can do when you're dealing with a variance is propose a modification to it.
When was this idea brought up? I saw that in the minutes and everything it had to do when Pete was here. And was this brought up a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago?
1 year ago.
Okay.
And to be clear, it was brought up under the guise of a different variance, but it's a very similar process.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of having a consumer on the appeal, if nothing else, so that the person who's providing the appeal feels that the deck isn't stacked against them, and that there's someone who's been in his shoes, and that ability to relate provides a lot more comfort, as opposed to, these people don't know, they haven't been in my position, they don't know it. And I think that goes a long way for the person providing the appeal, saying, well, at least there's been someone who, not necessarily on my side, but maybe understands. And again, I think Julie brought it up very well. Appearance a lot of times in this stuff helps go very far in having people accept decisions when they feel that they've been heard and not dismissed by people understand them. So I would actually be in favor of modifying the variance and saying that you could have that you would need a consumer on the appeal.
Mm-hmm. I would also support that. This is Megan. And in addition to the appearance, I think there's a lot of benefits there. I would also hope that the inclusion of more folks with lived experience will lead to more productive hearings, more productive conversations, in and around the appeals. So yes, I would support that recommendation.
And so to be clear, this would mean a member of the SHRC who has lived experience would join myself, John, and the vice chair in acting as the appeals committee.
Okay.
I think your two consumers both said okay, so I think they'd be willing to help and work.
And clarification, we might want to work on the wording a little bit, because if the if the committee is made up of what is it, the chair, the vice chair, and you, Tanika?
Yes.
If either of those individuals are representing the SHRC as a consumer, then are those three people sufficient as the committee? Or in some years it may not be a consumer representative serving as chair or vice chair, and so those years we'd have 4 people as part of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good distinction.
Yeah. I also wonder, and this might not be something for right now, but folks who maybe serve not in a consumer capacity, but that maybe do identify as having lived experiences. I wonder if there'd also be that flexibility, looking forward as the collection of folks on the SHRC change. So I wonder if the wording that Sandy was referring to might one day also flex there. Kind of just a hopeful thought for me, of clinicians naming, their own challenges. That's what I'm chatting about now.
Mm-hmm. So is this something that we bring up as we're approving the variance that we would like to go ahead and modify at this point? So, or do we do it at the end after Jason has provided all of the variances, and then when we go to vote, what is the procedure? That's what I'm looking for.
You're asking me?
Anyone who knows the answer, I'm asking.
I don't think that you have to do it at any set time. You will have to vote on it, and the language in the variance regulation says that you have to issue your written decision on the variance, and at that point it can be modifying, approving, denying, etc. So that's the guidance that's in the regulation.
So
my past experience, I'll jump in real quick, and just from what I recall was that y'all reviewed it, and then after, I'm not sure if y'all went in closed session or what, and then we received a final letter from the chair, and I'll scroll up. This is the letter we received last time, so it would have given any comments that y'all wanted to provide.
Okay.
Then that was the final approval. Now, in regards, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't, y'all are having a good discussion, but I did scroll to the bottom of the page, or the policy, about the language here in the policy. And just, if y'all let me, again, we will defer to all of you who you want to appoint on the committee. So I'll just change the language right here, where it says 2 members, which is rather restrictive, apparently. So I'll change that language to whatever language y'all prefer I change to reflect the who you choose to appoint to the committee.
Okay.
Jason, before you go on to the next 2, I wanted to let you know that the committee has been made aware of specifically the differences between exemptions and variances, and that BCBR does have exemptions right now that encompass the next 2 variances. We've spoken kind of about the nuances of that. And so when you're going through those, we will entertain them. The committee will entertain them as requested, but certainly the conversation will be about whether they will be granting those, denying those, or some other combination of the 2. But I just wanted you to know they are aware of the exemptions, and that can kind of inform how you explain them next.
Sure, that's wonderful. Is it okay if I go to the next group then?
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah, so Tanika and I have had some very good conversations over the past few months, few weeks, and trying to determine, some of these we were having both exemptions and variances too. I want to make sure that we're being transparent in what we do. So, if it's needed both, so, one time we had a variance for certain issues because the variance explained the reason for addressing a particular issue, and then we had an exemption that explained the reason for addressing a particular issue as well. So that, you know, as I stated to Tanika in all of our discussions, it was, you know, we want to assure transparency and why we're doing what we're doing, and, you know, just to have an informed discussion. Not just to say, well, you know, I've got a exemption, I don't need to even consider meeting the spirit of the regulations. Even with exemptions, we attempt to meet the spirit of the regulations when possible. So the next section is 12 EAC 351150 C3 A and E. We had variances to both of those for the last 3 years, and since we implemented double bunking, we had variances for those. We started a conversation about, you know, do we, other facilities that share rooms, one, do we need a variance because of that? That evolved much conversation with Tanika and I. We also learned that, or discussed the fact that BCBR does have a variance to Section A, which is privacy and storage space. We have an exemption for that. So 12 VAC 3511550 C3A, we already have an exemption. However, this request, and you know, if you determine that we have an exemption, therefore we don't need a variance, I completely understand. The primary reason for our exemption was to permit searches of resident rooms and staff able to assure routine monitoring of residents doing our Q30 checks and such, so that we're able to safely monitor the individuals and safely monitor the facility. So this request before you is for only that, a variance to this section for double bunking purposes though. And we put forth this variance recognizing, unfortunately, back in 2011, when we were in the unfortunate position to put 2 beds in a room that is fairly small, and a toilet in the room, there is obviously questions about privacy and storage space, which this area covers. So, you know, we recognize that that's not necessarily a public safety issue that will be addressed under an exemption. And we're, you know, we try to meet the spirit of the variance or of the regulations despite the double bunking by providing a privacy curtain and working with our residents on setting some pretty safe classification processes for residents to share a room with and such. So that's, and I know I'm rambling, so I apologize, but that's the reason the variance for A was submitted here, is to recognize the privacy and storage space issues with double bunking. Now you'll see that I will not be requesting a variance for E. That has to do with substantially meet the requirement for a living environment with clean air, free and odors. And frankly, after reviewing that, I mean, we think that, you know, we still have a need to meet that mandate of an area clean, free of odors, et cetera. I think the reasoning originally when double bunking came on board was why that particular variance was suggested was because of the toilet in the room. But my personal opinion is perhaps that takes it maybe to another level of discussion there. And in reality, the spirit of the variance and the reason for the variance is already covered under A if you choose to grant that variance. And our housing policy is attached, though we would be following this policy regardless of the size of those rooms. The housing policy is attached for your reference, and many of you are likely aware of the review mechanisms we have in place to safely bunk individuals together.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've rambled a bit, but I'm open to questions.
Jason, this is David. Of course, I looked through your, the instruction on the resident housing assignments and double bunking. Where you have the risk classification, X, Y, Z. Yes. Z is low to no risk. There actually is no such thing as no risk. And you may actually be setting yourself up if something was to happen with the double bunking classification with the no risk. I would strongly suggest if you look at redoing this, get rid of that no risk and just put low risk. According to, I do threat assessments, and according to the literature that any one of us are at risk of 3% of being violent towards another person. There's no such thing as no risk. It depends on situation. I'm just suggesting that you get rid of that no risk and just leave it as low risk, because if you did have somebody assault another person in the room, somebody could say, hey, you said this person had no risk, but they did. Just a point of view.
Thank you, sir. That's a very good point, and we will definitely address that.
So for purposes of discussion here, I think there are kind of three things that the committee's considering, right? So you have this variance before you, recognizing that there's also simultaneously an exemption. Exemptions are about safety, and variances are about, we're trying to honor the spirit of the regs, but we need to do it a different way. The committee could decide to grant the variance, recognizing that there is an exemption, with the advice or suggestion to VCBR that they don't seek an exemption, but that they continue with the variance when the exemption expires in a year through the approval of the variance for the next 2 years. So that's an option. The committee could also just deny the variance, recognizing there's an exemption, or modify the request.
Tanika, I jump into one of the comments that you made, and based on the reasoning for the exemption, and I can pull that up. There's actually the issue comes there is I would request, and this is just my request, that we would likely continue to request an exemption solely on the safety issue
Searches.
Related to searches and such. That's the primary purpose for the exemption. So it covers that area.
Okay. As we're discussing this, one of the things I was thinking about is my recommendation, my idea is that we would right now vote yes on the variance and be redundant, just because right now it's been on the register, it's been open for public comment, it's been following the process. It doesn't hurt to say yes, and it doesn't create any questions for anyone as to why did it go to the register, why did it get public comment, and all of a sudden why did the committee vote no. So if it's redundant and it's fine, I would just say, you know, it's fine to keep it in and we'll just move forward. But just ask Jason to remind us in the future that an exemption is in place, and that the reason he's not asking for that renewal of that variance is because the exemption is in place. So that would be my take on the matter.
How does the committee feel about that?
I have the same feeling. I would just vote yes, and whatever the natural occurrence happens, let it go. If it's redundant, that's okay.
Other comments?
I also agree with that statement. I think that we should just keep it as is. So I agree.
I concur with that as well.
So we are at, I think, at a point here where we need a motion. Tim?
John, did you want to do all three at the same time? There's one more.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
So I'll simply state there is one more, but I'm removing the request for the variance. Tanika educated me on some of the process and maybe the intent behind this particular variance. And one, we had a variance to A through E, and we were already meeting that variance requirement. So we actually, staff do a very, very good job. And just to hear a quick story, we implemented an electronic health record in the agency recently, and my staff were very poignant to point out some areas that they wanted to add documentation to make sure we covered all the sections of the regulations of A through E, which is about clinical professional reviewing all restrictions and time limited restrictions. My staff are very good about making sure they meet those areas. So we actually meet those points. My recollection, just for a history, is that variance was put into place when we were doing some emergency restrictions in the evenings and maybe a clinical professional was not on site. However, the process that we have at the facility is a clinical person on call. So what occurs is there's an issue that, you know, is immediate life safety issue or something, and we have the staff on site, the unit manager, facility manager on site, call that clinical professional, consult the issue, and then the clinical professional reviews the temporary restriction on the next business day. So even with that, the regulations are met. And then I was going to request a variance for the GIF B5, but after Tanika and I discussed, we're able to meet the requirements by working with the LHRC. Tanika and I both share a common goal to, you know, meet the spirit or meet the regulations in all areas as much as possible. So if we're able to meet those regulations, and my understanding is it's a review of the restrictions to make sure they're in accordance with regulations, and I think that's, you know, a necessary thing to do, and we're open to that. So I'm going to remove my request for that. And the last issue down at the bottom, and I'll just to highlight this variance that we 12 EAC 35115 C3D dignity. That was a variance for rooms in our medical unit with no windows. And I'm removing that variance request because one of the pieces of expansion that we were able to accomplish was it's making sure all of our temporary medical rooms had windows in them. That is all of my requests, period. So.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm sorry. With the, if I understand correctly, you're removing the request for the variance to 100B5. How are restrictions? Because B5 talks about LHRC reviewing restrictions any longer than 7 days. So how are restrictions being reviewed externally from VCBR, or are they? Because that's not coming to that subcommittee that's formed.
Correct. And I can jump in, Jason, sorry. So there is an exemption to this now. And the conversation that Jason and I had was that really they could still do this. The exemption was about needing to implement a restriction in an emergency situation. And prior to our regulations changing in 2017, there was some requirement for that to happen prior to. The way our regulations are now, these reviews can happen after they've already been implemented if the restriction has occurred 3 or more times in a 30-day period, or if the restriction lasts longer than 7 days. So once those 2 thresholds are met, then it would be reviewed by the LHRC, and really just to make sure that it followed the review process. Also a change from our regs is that the local human rights committees providers aren't assigned to a particular one, right? Like they're not affiliated. And so they can essentially go to any LHRC in their region, which could work for VCBR as it does for any of our other facilities. If they had a restriction that met those thresholds, they could go to one of the LHRCs to get them reviewed. Okay. And Jason and I were talking about how theoretically they could do that. But again, they have an exemption in place because it was about safety and being able to act immediately.
I tell you what I would love is in the future, you know, after we resolve all of this, that maybe in a meeting or two, as part of our agenda, we have a listing, and it kind of goes back to what Tim had said, a listing of all existing exemptions by the commissioner, and I could just pencil those in my little book as to who has them. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? So Tim,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
would you frame this into a motion?
No. Sorry. No, it's fine. I will make a motion that we will accept the renewal of variances, VAC 35, 115, 150, 175, 180, 190, 200, and 210 as put forward by Jason Wilson. And we're going to make a modification to the variance regarding the appeal committee that included with the chair, vice chair, and director of human rights, that we will also have a consumer member from the SHRC as part of the appeal committee. And we will not be renewing 12 VAC 35, 115, 50 C3A, nor 100 B5. Is that correct, Tanika?
I thought I heard that the committee did want to grant the variance to 50C3, even though it was going to be redundant.
Then yes, then we are going to, yes,
want to
add that to the
grant.
top, yes.
Is that true? Okay.
Yes. So we will keep the redundancy in place, but the next time, so that is the motion in front of you.
Do I have a second?
I second that motion. Well said, Tim.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so moved. Clea, do you have any questions on any of that?
No, thank you. I got it.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you, Jason.
thank you, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Thank y'all for your
Jason?
time. Yes.
Jason, before you leave, could you just go over quickly about the construction maybe and the different buildings and where you are with that? If you have time, that would be great.
Sure.
I'm sorry, John. Can he do that? I'm sorry, John. I apologize. Can he do that real quick?
Sure. Well, as far as I'm concerned, yes, it's up to Jason to say if he can do it or not.
Yeah, are y'all still viewing my screen out of curiosity?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
All right, so forgive my notes. This was a presentation I gave yesterday to the state board. So I'll really quickly, some of the expansion details and what we're hoping to accomplish. And I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to travel west, as they say, and around where 460 and 360 meet in the beautiful town of Burkeville. The first thing that you will see is we're definitely attempting to improve the aesthetics of the facility. We're promoting recovery and not confinement. You all visited the old facility before, and it was not the most appealing location at construction. So if you drive by again, you will see that the new buildings resemble more of a college campus or even Piedmont Geriatric. We chose to try to be consistent on campus. So the new facilities inside and out are definitely more aesthetically pleasing, and hopefully will assist the residents with engaging in treatment much easier. And the design firm that we work with actually won a award for their design of the facility, and we're doing a study to see if we see a reduction. Not that we have a high level of aggression, but to see if we will see a reduction in aggression afterwards.
Jason,
The first
can you
unit.
show us something different? We're still seeing the variant stuff.
Oh, I am so sorry.
That's okay.
How about now?
Yes, now we see a PowerPoint.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you.
So first, well, it's our 48-bed transitions unit has actually, the environment is finished, the construction's complete, but we're just trying to go through some obstacles of getting final approval to remove residents and start using the space. But that's a 48-bed transitions unit. It's a 3-story apartment complex, you might as well say, with 2 apartments on each level, each having 4 bedrooms, and they have their own kitchen and bathroom and common living space in each apartment. And the residents will be able to work on kind of independent living skills. We'll have a process that they can order food from us to prepare their own meals, and giving them more independence while they're here in order to gain those skills before leaving. We also will have the 6-bed female unit. We have 2 females at Central State right now, and our intention is to bring those females back to the Burkeville campus. We're adding 5 regular housing units, I would say, but we're specifying that 1 will be for the medically complex individuals. As you're aware, right now we're operating 1 unit at Piedmont Geriatric Hospital that houses our medically complex individuals. We're going to bring them back here, and they will have their dedicated space. 1 unit specifically for individuals that are classified as intellectually disabled, and another unit for those that are classified as serious mental illness. So to give them their own treatment environment with dedicated, and we have dedicated treatment teams, but the dedicated treatment team working with them in a dedicated treatment environment is going to be helpful. We're expanding our vocational and educational areas and expanding our medical and treatment areas. And the timeline for construction, as I've stated, the transitions housing unit is actually complete right now, but due to construction of around the area, we're not able to move residents in, so we're going to temporarily use that as a staff area. Our warehouse and pharmacy is actually completed right now as well, but we are still working to get final occupancy on that. And then in September 2021, we hope to have the remaining residential buildings complete, as well as our medical area complete. And then we hope to have final completion in February 2022 of everything. I'll share that I shared this slide yesterday. It was at a state board meeting that had been postponed a year due to COVID. And I almost cried when I opened up the my original version of this particular slide, because it showed that I was supposed to be in the location sometime last year. So it kind of is telling how construction can get delayed. But nonetheless, we're hoping that we will meet these new target dates. Any questions for you guys?
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before we move on to the next item, I want to jump back to public comment. I asked for public comments and we veered off into something else. So we actually didn't come to closure. Are there any public comments? Okay. The next item is regulation spotlight. Carlton?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right, I am going to share my screen. So you all should be seeing a PowerPoint now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Well, again, I am Carlton Henderson. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the Office of Human Rights Training and Development Coordinator. And we are excited, myself and my colleagues, about being able to share with you all certain sections of the regulations in sort of like a bite-sized chunk each month. So as the training and development coordinator, we thought it only befitting that I kick off this regulation spotlight series. So I will not be before you very long at all. If there are questions, please feel free to chime in and ask, and I will do my best to not disappoint my State Human Rights Director or my Supervisor, Mary Claire. So again, thank you for the opportunity to share. We definitely have an awesome State Human Rights Committee, and I'm sure you all are all familiar with the human rights regulations. So our purpose through presenting this spotlight series is really just to add to your understanding of the regulations through some education on some of the specific sections of the regulations, and marry your role as SHRC members to our regulatory mandate. So the Spotlight series, I just want to put forth a disclaimer, if you will. It's going to be an overview as opposed to a deep dive into the regulations. However, as part of our statewide training series, we are offering training to our providers on the human rights regulations, and you all are certainly welcome to attend if you have the time to do so. Our next human rights training sessions are scheduled for June 24th and October 21st. So let's get started. So the authority and the applicability of the Office of Human Rights to assure or to guarantee individuals' rights protections is documented in the human rights regulations in Section 10 and enforced through Virginia Code. So the regulations assure specific rights to people who are receiving services from providers who are licensed, funded, or operated by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And they require some specific actions on the part of providers and on the part of those of us within the Office of Human Rights. Section 20 documents the policy for individuals assured and legal rights. So there are several quote unquote rights that individuals receiving services have. And when we think about provider compliance, we're really looking to ensure assurance or a guarantee of every of those individuals' rights as spelled out in each of the sections of the human rights regulations. So in a nutshell, each individual receiving services shall be guaranteed or assured respect for basic human dignity, services that are provided which are consistent with sound therapeutic practice, and also protection to exercise their legal, their civil, and their human rights while receiving these services. And we wanted to start with these sections just to provide some context and a foundation for all of the other sections of the regulations that you all will have an opportunity to hear about as the year goes on. So again, I've talked, even in that first slide, a lot about assurance and guarantee of individuals' human rights, which is the foundational purpose of the human rights regulations. So as is documented in Section 40, this includes the individual's right to make complaints for violations of the regulations, and also to be able to have their complaints resolved. Individuals or their authorized representatives, if in fact that is applicable, can also explore their legal options. So just because they are receiving services doesn't mean those legal rights disappear. In Section 40, we also begin to see provider responsibilities in an effort to assure individuals' rights. So essentially, providers must take every action to ensure that the individuals they are providing services to and their AR, again, if applicable, are made aware of their rights, that they're provided a copy of their rights, and also that they're informed about how to file a complaint if they feel their rights have been violated. Providers, they also must make the human rights regulations available to the individuals, to their ARs. Their staff should also be made very aware of the regulations. And also the rights must be displayed in the service area. And also the information about our protection and advocacy agency, the Disability Law Center of Virginia, that information must also be displayed and provided to individuals and their ARs. So we talked about some of the foundational things. It was also important that, being as though we're kicking off this regulation spotlight series, that we just talk about what are the responsibilities of our human rights committees. That being you all, the state human rights committee, and then our local human rights committee. So I'm sure each of you all know, again, because you all are wonderful and amazing members of the SHRC, I'm sure you are fully aware of your responsibilities as committee members. But again, we would be remiss if we didn't discuss these particular sections of the actual human rights regulations. So in the hierarchy of the Office of Human Rights unique system of due process, an important responsibility of you all, the State Human Rights Committee, is to oversee the operation of all of the local human rights committees. And specifically, this requires the SHRC to appoint local human rights committee members after considering all of the pertinent information provided by the current members of those particular or specific committees, also the advocate, and also any information provided by our State Human Rights Director. It's also the responsibility of the committee to review and approve the LHRC bylaws, which also falls, of course, under your purview as the SHRC. And rounding out some of your operational functions is the State Human Rights Committee's mandate to oversee and assist the LHRC in dutifully performing their functions, which includes developing guidance documents that will, in a sense, aid the LHRCs in effectively carrying out their responsibilities and regulatory mandates. So as the regulations are all about assuring the rights protection of individuals receiving services within our service delivery system, an important aspect of the State Human Rights Committee's responsibility is engaging in activity regarding violations of individuals' rights. So as part of our system of due process, these activities include things such as reviewing the decisions of the LHRCs when and as required. It also includes your review of LHRC decisions as the SHRC may involve their responsibility to conduct hearings as part of the appeal process. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the State Human Rights Committee is responsible for making recommendations regarding alleged violations of individuals' rights to the commissioner, to the board, and the providers' governing bodies. Among your other responsibilities, among the State Human Rights Committee's other responsibilities, is this mandate to review provider requests for variances to the Human Rights Committees and to either grant or deny their provider's application. I think you all may know just a little bit about that process. So what about our LHRCs? As the State Human Rights Committee is responsible for oversight of the LHRCs, our LHRCs are, of course, on the front line of assuring individuals' rights. Much of the LHRC's attention may be targeted to the review of certain aspects of individuals' rights. So in that responsibility, the LHRC is, or has to rather, understand the need and the purpose of a provider's intention to initiate or continue restrictions of an individual's assured rights. And restrictions can be proposed and implemented against an individual's dignity or their right to freedoms of everyday life. And I want you to stay tuned, because as we get further into the year in this Spotlight series, you all will be presented with some material or spotlight on Section 50, which is dignity, and also Section 100, which talks about freedoms of everyday life. Just to add some more context to this area of review about restrictions. Restrictions must be reviewed by the LHRC for any restriction that lasts longer than 7 days, or any restriction that is imposed 3 or more times within a 30-day period. Other reviews are related to an individual's capacity or lack thereof. And then the LHRC is tasked with reviewing the designation of a next friend. And you'll get more on authorized representatives later this year too. The LHRCs also review behavioral treatment plans and any other matters which are significant to maintaining the health, safety, and welfare of the individuals served. So the Office of Human Rights has developed LHRC review forms to aid not only the LHRC members, but also the provider. And these forms promote essentially a systematic and organized method of reviewing these certain tasks. Additionally, other responsibilities of the LHRC is that they are responsible for completing some of the legwork concerning the variances. So prior to the director from DCBR coming, that variance should have gone through or should have been presented to the LHRC, which was then presented to you all, the SHRC, for you to either grant or deny. An extremely important function of our LHRCs is their responsibility to conduct fact-finding hearings. And this step in our system of due process, it's invaluable for the individual and for the provider too. The process of hearing the perspective of the individual and the provider, and then determining based on the regulations whether processes have been followed as stipulated in the regs, it really validates the institution of the Office of the Human Rights and the human rights regulations. So that, in a nutshell, is the foundation of our regulations and the responsibilities of the SHRC and the LHRC as stipulated in Section 270 of the Human Rights Regulations. Thank you for your time and attention. And of course, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the committee?
Thank you. Thanks for that overview.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Carlton. I have had the opportunity to see some of these spotlight trainings at the local level, and this is really wonderful and very, just very informative for the committee here. So thank you very much for doing that.
Of course. All righty.
You made us proud.
Thank you. I was going to say I heard silence, so I'm gonna make my exit.
Okay. Mary Claire.
Let me share my screen now.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong one. Well, I thought I had it up. I have the wrong one up. Sorry. Just bear with me for 1 second.
Time's up.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said 1 second. Can y'all see that?
No.
Not yet.
All right. My screen is not sharing for some reason. Oh no, where did I go? Share screen. There we go. Now, how about now?
Yep.
It's starting. Yep.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay, good.
Got it.
So this is for, we are always behind, as I've said before. So the information for the injury information is for February. And so we're a little bit behind because we can't get, so I can't get March until after April 17th. So we're always going to be a little bit behind. But as you can see, we had some high rates of not incidents per se, but definitely, again, seclusion restraint, which we're monitoring at the facilities. And I have talked to Tanika about doing some additional training as well on seclusion restraint for the facilities. But as you can see, the Central State had 9 incidents. Not all of them were injuries. They either had to send someone to the ER or had medical treatment. They had a serious injury, self-inflicted injury by an individual. They had 1 fall and they had no deaths, which is always a good thing. And they had 25 peer-to-peer. Eastern State had 28 peer-to-peer, which is a little bit higher. They had 2 falls, and unfortunately they had 2 deaths. Neither of those deaths, however, were related to COVID. And then at Northern Virginia, they only had 2. None of them were serious incidents. And they had 26 peer-to-peer. Southern Virginia, again, had 1 and none of them were serious. And they only had 2 peer-to-peer. So for them, that was a very good month. And Southwest had 38. They had 7 incidents. That should have been 3, not 13. So I apologize. Sometimes my fat fingers get in the way. So they had 3 SIB and 3 falls. And again, no deaths. 7 for Western State, and is typically Western State does not have a lot of incidents. They have a lot of seclusion and restraint, which we will talk about, but they don't typically have a lot of incidents. And they only had 1 was an SIB. They have an individual there that continuously, the same thing at Southwest that has that the 3 at Southwest were all the same person. And for those that don't know a lot about serious injurious behavior, we have individuals that sometimes can be on a 1-to-1 and still are able to get something to ingest because they are that quick in doing it. And most of the time, the reason it's in the incident category is because we have to send them to the ER to either x-ray where it is or get an endoscopy performed so it can be removed. And peer-to-peer for Western was 29, which for that month for them was pretty high. Theirs are usually a lot lower. For Catawba, again, 9. Unfortunately for them, they had 3 deaths. I do believe that for them, 1 of them was COVID, 2 were not, and they had 6 falls. Again, at a geriatric facility, you do tend to have more falls, but as you can note, Piedmont didn't. So I think some of this is a result of staff being out for various reasons, and we are experiencing over census at most of our facilities, which they're trying to manage, and shortness of staff at most of them. CCCA only had 1 for that month, and their seclusion and restraint was actually very low. But just to let you know, one of those reasons is because their census for February was only at 24. I believe now they are up to 30. They are trying to get back to full census, but they had to go down because of staffing issues. And when COVID hit that facility, it hit them at 50% of the staff were out. So they had to reduce the they had to reduce the number of clients. And at one point, they were down to 14 individuals being served at CCCA because of how hard they got hit by COVID. PGH again had a death. I do not believe that one was a COVID death. And the one at VCBR was related to COVID. The two facilities that had the most COVID deaths, which now that has slowed down tremendously, were Piedmont and VCBR, respectively. Piedmont had more but VCBR had more than other facilities. A lot of that was due to the medical issues related to the individuals at both Piedmont and VCBR. Hiram Davis had one death that was due to their medical issues and not due to COVID. And Southeastern was very good for that month. They had no incidents of having to send anyone to the hospital, which was great for them for that month. Going to seclusion and restraint, again, Central State had, you can see the 113 hours to 64. They had 32 individuals that received seclusion and restraint for that month. Most of them were minimal for about 2 to 3 hours. They were not very high. Eastern State had 6 hours of seclusion, 97 of restraint, 54 individuals. Again, the longest was 53 minutes. So most of the individuals were not in seclusion and restraint for long periods of time. Same thing at Northern Virginia. We had very little seclusion, 110 hours of restraint, and 35 individuals, and the longest was 20 minutes for a restraint. For Southern, they did have an individual that was in seclusion for more than 97 hours. It was a unique case for them, and that person has now been discharged. And for the month of February and March, they were also dealing with some COVID outbreaks with staff and individuals. For Southwest, it was, as you can see, 213 and 177. That was 37 individuals. And not the highest was 93 hours. And that was a variation of seclusion and restraint for that individual. For Western State, unfortunately, their numbers are still high. We are going to be working with them soon. They just have a new facility director. I'm sure most of you have gotten that information. Mary Claire Smith is retiring, and their medical director, Dr. Anderson, is their new facility director. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to work with him. That one was in seclusion restraint for 667 hours. It's an individual that they have a lot of issues with. Medication does not work with, and they are working to get that individual to figure out resources for that individual. The rest of them were not very high. Even again, CCCA was not very high because they did not have many residents. So that was, and this is supposed to be 100, not 1,000. And as you can see for their, for what we do for Joint Commission, most of them, they are supposed to be above 85. The only place that wasn't was Southwest for their screenings. And I am already working with them to make sure they get that resolved. The only other thing I wanted to let you know is that our staff is starting to go back and do face-to-face in our facilities, not with all complaints or with all abuse neglect, but with the AIMS 24, which is related to a serious injury or a sexual allegation. We have not had any that we've had to do yet. They are also working more extensively with, if the facility has a patient relations department, they are working more specifically with that patient relations department to ensure that the individuals that have complained, or for those that have an abuse neglect allegation, that they are working with that office. Also wanted to let you know we're going to have some staffing issues for the facilities. Carrie is leaving. She is retiring after 40 years of service. So the next meeting will be her last. I believe it's prior. She's going out May 14th. Her retirement date is June 1. But of course, all of us long-termers have a lot of leave that have to be used before we can retire. So she has some leave that she has to use. We are also in the process of hiring a P14 for the Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute, because the person that is there now, Jen Anglin, is doing both community and Northern Virginia. We did do interviews. We did not get a candidate. We've gone back out. We are starting to do interviews for Carrie's position next week, so we can have somebody in the position prior to Carrie leaving, because that is a critical, well, all of them are critical positions, but that one definitely is a more critical position. Most of our staff that could be vaccinated have been vaccinated, and most of our staff have been fit tested. I did that myself. It was an interesting procedure. You have to wear a mask over your head and make sure you can't smell anything or taste anything. So it was kind of interesting. If you've ever been fit tested, it's kind of interesting, but got it done. So now if I need to go in the facilities and around patients, I can. Wanted to also let you know that I'm doing in-person TOVA training now. That had I'd been doing it virtually. So I just did a training. I've done some trainings that at the facilities this week. I did a training at Eastern State. They are hiring an emergency response team to help out, to provide more therapeutic influence when a code is called. And I and VCBR staff, who has an ERT team as well, helped with that training, and it went very well. I think that's all related to the changes in the facility. So unless you have any questions, I will turn it over to who's next.
Questions from the committee?
A lot of work, Mary. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a lot of work.
You're welcome.
Okay, next is a presentation from Jennifer.
Let me stop sharing my screen. I gotta figure out how to do this. Oh, here we go. There we go.
Hey, good morning, everybody. And I'm quite the opposite of Tim today. I think the pollen is more evident in the air. So if you hear me clearing my throat and sniffling, that's what it is. I've got a couple of updates related to community operations. To echo Mary Claire, we moved back to the return to field operation plan April 1st. Most of our staff have been vaccinated, the ones that chose to or were able to be, and then we've all been fit tested as well. So really what I wanted to do is just give some data on what we have done in the community so far. Excuse me, like Mary Claire also said, we're starting with the AIM 24 visits and starting with that as an on-site process. We've got some tools that we use, which is a pre-screening tool that we've developed. And then also it's called the Tableau dashboard. And it's really a collection of data that's reported by providers regarding COVID outbreaks. So we have access to that, and all of our staff does, so they can use that too to see what they would be going out to a provider. So the cases that we've been screening right now are abuse and neglect allegations involving sexual assault, restraint with serious injury, and physical abuse with serious injury. And since April 1st, we've actually had 5 cases that have met that criteria. And out of the 5, only 1 has been completed remotely due to the COVID outbreak, and the other 4 were able to be completed on site. We've had no concerns from the advocates going out to do it. We have a process outlined that everyone's been trained on, and so they've been utilizing that. Also, Tanika sent out a memo to all of the licensed providers in the community, notifying them of our return to work or return to field operations plan, and that we would be contacting to do pre-screening so they would know what the expectations were as well. And we haven't had any issue with that yet. So I think that's pretty cool. We've gotten, not cool that the cases have came up that we've had to go out since April 1st, but I think it's good that we were able to respond using our process to 4 of them out of 5. So that is one thing that we're doing. And then another update, and we've been working on kind of the last couple of months, and I don't believe I've mentioned it yet, but we're kind of ironing the process out. As you know, for OHR, when we recommend citation, if we find violations for community providers, we have to utilize licensing to actually issue the citation. They're the department issuing body for those. But we can recommend citation under the human rights regulations. So the process has been revised. Licensing has actually designated a full-time staff person to handle all of the OHR only CAPs or corrective action plans and citations. And so this process is a little different. It used to be that our advocates and managers would work directly with the primary or assigned licensing specialist regarding specific providers and submit the citation recommendations to them. While they're still involved and copied, Tanya Carr, who you may recognize the name, she's worked for the department in other roles, was hired as the OL CAP specialist that our office is working primarily with across the state. So what that has done, and that was started, we started testing it, so to speak, February 1st. And obviously with any new process, there were some bumps in the road, some protocols that needed to be aligned between offices, and really just some retraining on our staff and some learning across the board. I think the benefit to this, and we're getting closer to that, is that it's streamlining the process statewide and really making the citations, even the format and the clarity and how we're wording things more consistent. Also, we've aligned our process with licensing's process regarding that. One of those components is a dispute process that the provider has access to if they disagree with the citation. So we've had more experience with that and kind of our role in that, and moving forward what that looks like. So I think we're moving in a good direction. Like I said, there's been some bumps in the road, but we've learned from it, and we've had the opportunity to provide our team with more training. And I really have seen an improvement since this process started in February. But I just want to give you an update regarding that. And I don't know if Tanika has anything to add about that process.
No, just really thankful for the opportunity to work with and have such a competent, compassionate team. And hopefully that's reflected in the reports that you hear from both our Associate Director for Community Operations and our Associate Director for Facility Operations. They are separate teams with distinct, meaningful work, but certainly part of one larger Office of Human Rights. So I don't have anything to add other than appreciation.
Thank you. Do you all have any questions? That's really all I have this time.
Questions from the committee? Okay. The next item is subcommittee reports, starting with bylaws. Monica?
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say that I did have a chance to review the bylaws, the State Human Rights Committee bylaws, and the recommendations that were made from Karen. And so there wasn't a whole lot of information that we needed to correct, but there is some information that needs to be highlighted and reviewed. And so in Cora's absence, I do want to kind of wait until she can also be present and we can kind of do a better collaboration. I reviewed them, but I failed to kind of set up a time when she and I could go over them together and maybe even bring Tanika into that and Jennifer. So I will be scheduling something. I'll send out an email to you all so that we can collectively look at them. And now with the information that we talked about with the FOIA appointee of the vice chair, adding that information also, because there is just areas where the committee's duties as the chairperson, things like that there were recommendations in those areas. So this will kind of align with some of the information that Karen provided for us. So I hope to have more of a comprehensive presentation for you all for the next meeting, but I will say we're on the right track. So that is progress is being made in this area. And so I'm really happy about that. Aside from the bylaws, I just wanted to give you all a brief update to HR Access. So I have done a few recordings on my own of the information that I have. Now I have to pause and say that what we received today from Carlton was excellent. I mean, I just want y'all to join me in giving him a round of applause. Let's do it in a circular motion. Very good, very good. Because that was great, and I felt so drawn in. I mean, his voice tone and everything. So I am giving him an A+ and recommending his voice instead of mine, especially in pollen season, because it's it's just not sounding well. But I'm hoping, and Tanika, I'm going to reach out to you just to see if there's anyone in the IT department who can assist me a little bit with kind of fusing the separate, because I did one section at a time. So I'd like to kind of figure out how to fuse all the different recordings together. I'm no wizard on editing. I just know how to press play and stop. So, so I will need
Monica,
some
I
help.
think it's great that they're separate. I mean, sometimes folks don't have time to listen to the whole thing. So
Yes.
being able to go pick one and listen to it while you're taking your afternoon walk, I think that's good.
You're really making me feel a lot better. So, so I'm gonna, I guess get with you so that we can kind of figure out, and also with Carlton, because he's been a great help to me up until this point. But I'm just like, I'm sure this is not ready. So I hope to at least provide for you all maybe an excerpt at our next meeting if we have time for that, so you can kind of hear the direction that we're going. But the idea of this is that the same positive feeling that we had today in listening to Carlton is the same thing we want to give to the individuals that this stuff applies to. And I hope that you all can just continue to reflect on how refreshing it was to hear someone tell you what this stuff is, and that you don't have to do so much of the work of reading it at the same time and trying to disseminate and understand it. And so when we consider our populations of mental health, developmental disability, and substance abuse, that can be a challenge for people who don't fit in those categories. And so we want to make sure that this is something that is definitely applicable and accessible for those who do. So so that's our goal, and I'm glad we had that spotlight, because that is the feeling that we want to give to the individuals that we're serving in Virginia. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Policy, Sandy?
All right, I'm going to start off by saying that I wish I only had the sniffles and the scratchy throat like Jennifer. I'm going to add in the heavy coughing, which I think you've heard a couple of times, so I apologize in advance. For policy, I believe that we're kind of at a hold right now. There's no active information that the policy subcommittee is reviewing. The last was about transport and secure transport that VCBR was doing. And we, I think, extensively reviewed that along with the department's instruction regarding transportation. And there's no obvious outliers or concerns that are involved. I think what I would ask of the State Human Rights Committee members is that, again, when we're getting the report on VCBR, if there's any issues or questions that you have that might either come along and be appropriate for the policy subcommittee, and or that we can kind of keep in the back of our minds, so that when we have individuals presenting to us, again, I think that we're going to be looking at seeing Jason or somebody from VCBR at least annually, that we can have those issues addressed then. But for David or Mary Claire, anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I agree with you, Sandy. The transportation with the restraints, that's pretty well cut and dry. Like you sent out the emails, not much more we can do at this point.
I didn't think so.
I do
Yeah, they're
agree
pretty-
with you, though, that please refer any VCBR stuff to us, so we can have at least an opinion and let you know our thoughts on that.
I've got one that I was looking over. And I don't know if this is a policy thing, but I was looking at the VCBR report, and if any of you guys have the PDF open on another screen, if you go to page 66, when they're going through allegations of going through human rights, they have in the chart, they have how many were reported, but they don't have a number on how many were substantiated. So when I'm looking, I see something, and I got 11 for dignity and 1 for confidentiality, but I don't know what they found as valid or not.
If they were substantiated, she would have noted that. So there must not have been any substantiated.
Yeah, we actually brought that up with her before, that if there was something, that she would expound on that and let us know what happened.
Okay.
But I'll be more than willing to follow up on that if you need me to.
No, I just, sometimes in the other reports we'd had in the past, Mary Claire, was they had the how many were
Right.
reported, and then they had how many were stamped, just so you could get a quick glimpse. But
We are going to be revamping that report. So that is something that we will note, that we will have that in the future. So we will be kind of revamping that support moving forward once we get the new person in.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on policy? All right, Sandy, Officer Subcommittee.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank everybody who responded to me to let me know if you were interested in serving as chair for our committee, State Human Rights Committee, for the upcoming year. That Will has kindly agreed to serve as vice chair again next year. And I personally support that wholeheartedly, in that I think he's represented as well as vice chair, supporting John, and being available to local human rights committees, either in person or through Zoom meetings. So again, I support Will in being vice chair. With that being said, we did have 4 individuals, excuse me, that responded as being interested or willing to be chair for the next year. And I'll mention, before getting ready to cough again, in alphabetical order, they are Julie, David, Monica, and Tim. So that being said, I go back to what Karen had told us, that I can't visualize how we're going to do this in May, whether, you know, again, knowing that we have 4 individuals, as we are doing a roll count, that each of us are saying which of those 4 individuals we would want as our chair, and then Clee or someone be tabulating that and letting us know after the roll call. That's I guess how I'm seeing it. I don't know what the thing was, and I don't have my chat up now. Mary Claire, was there some other way that we were able to do a vote of some sort that's recorded, other than
there is a poll. Oh, we're echoing now. There is a poll that can be done. You can also privately chat, that each person could privately chat to Clee and give their information. So either one of those could work. Carlton's very good at doing the polls, so I can get with him on how that would work and how we do those anonymously without everybody seeing them. But definitely could do something that would go to Tanika or Cleve, a private chat, and I don't know if Karen, that would suffice.
I don't think you
So I'm
can
looking
do
at what
any
Karen
of
put
that.
in the chat.
Mhm.
And it says that votes taken during any meeting conducted through electronic communication means shall be recorded by name in roll call fashion and included in the minutes. So I think even if we were to do some type of poll, at some point people would have to say, I, Tanika, vote for Will.
Right, yeah, and I was
vote for, right? Is that how you're interpreting that, Karen?
It is, and I think, you know, putting it in context, there's the provision in FOIA that allows the group to go into closed session to discuss prospective appointments or personnel, but also appointments, and you can discuss that in closed session, but you've never been able to vote on anything in closed session. And the whole, you know, underlying all of FOIA, even before this electronic piece, is the expectation that any actions and votes are taken in open session, even if it's something that you've discussed privately in closed session. And, you know, like Tanika says, I really don't see a way around that black letter language that says votes have to be actually recorded in roll call fashion by name and published in the minutes. So I think that, you know, who you vote for is.
So if we did a straw poll in closed session as a proxy for the real vote, we could potentially do that in closed session, then come out and actually have the roll call vote in open session.
Yeah, you can do that, but I mean, I hear that the concern that I'm hearing is, you know, I don't want to go on record as Karen, saying, you know, I do or don't vote for John, right? And I just don't see a legal way around that.
So doing anything in closed sessions is a moot point then. I mean, we still have to.
Well, the purpose of closed session for appointment purposes and administrative purposes and so forth is to discuss the candidates privately. So, you know, let's say I'm running and you all have a concern about my mental health or my fitness to serve or anything like that, right? You can have all that discussion in private to protect my privacy. And then when you come out, you just vote yes or no for Karen, right? But everybody doesn't know about my background or whatever's giving you pause, right? They just know John voted no for Karen. So there is merit in the closed section provision and having all those discussions. It's just that the actual yay or nay, the public has a right to according to the statute.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Why don't we do this? We're not going to vote until June.
I thought we voted in May and it went to the board in June. We don't vote until June?
I think we vote in
Tanika,
May.
this doesn't have to go to the board. The officer voting does not have to go to the state board.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so we always voted, we did the final vote in June and it was effective in July.
Well, I want to just ask one thing. It's clear that we're going to be Zoom meeting next month as well. And I asked that in part because of us hearing an appeal. And I find appeals by way of Zoom being very difficult.
Tanika, can you answer that?
As of today, it's going to be Zoom. And we have done an appeal virtually before. I think we're getting better and better with Zoom. But all things considered, I think it will be through Zoom. Mm-hmm.
If that changes, you'll let us know?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So anyway, since we don't vote till June, we have some time to figure out the logistics on how we want to do this. It sounds to me right now it would be closed session and then come out into open session and make the vote. Am I hearing anything different?
I think a closed session for us to talk is a good idea. I think it's great.
Right, and that's totally appropriate and definitely supported by the section on closed meetings.
And anything can happen by June. Anything can happen.
Okay, so then right now, let's just plan on, we'll do the voting in June with closed session, open session for the vote.
Is it June or May? I'm sorry. I thought it was
June.
May. Okay.
We vote in June and it's effective in July. And this does not have to go before the state board.
Right.
Okay, is that
And if
okay?
there's and if there's a real meeting in June, then it can be a ballot vote.
Yes.
I'm optimistic, okay?
But
Yeah.
we still have to say it out loud, right? Like, is that kind of what?
Yeah,
out
that I think I will look again and see if there's a way to make that happen, but I'm not willing to say that if we meet in person, it can be a ballot vote at this point. I would have to look at that again. We have done ballot votes in the past, but there's been lots of changes to FOIA, lots of FOIA advisory council opinions. I'm certain that the part about recording in the minutes in roll call fashion by name is tied to meeting electronically. I'm sure of that.
We just had a local board of supervisors, and when I was on the board, we did the same thing, and they had to pick their chairman and vice chairman all by roll call.
By roll call at an in-person meeting?
Well, it was a Zoom meeting, but they still had to do that.
Yeah.
The last one they did last year before COVID was also roll call in-person meeting. It had to say who did what.
Yeah.
And when I was on the board, we had to do it by roll call also.
Yeah, so I will look at it again, and and see, I understand your concerns, but I don't want to commit to saying if we're in person, then you can do it by ballot with the way FOIA is now. I have to look at it again.
Could you let us know at the next meeting, since we're not going to vote till June? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Okay.
John, can I just, can I add here that, I'm pleased as punch that there are so many people interested. That's great. I kind of thought, oh, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring, we'll see what happens. I'm in my third year, I think. But I think also the committee has collectively a desire to do good. So, I think collectively too, we'll vote for the person, who will do a good job, even though there are several of us that would do a good job in that role. And your shoes will be very hard to fill. But I just want to say, I'll put my ego aside if I don't get a vote. It's okay. It's good that we have more than one person to choose from. So I throw that out there because I understand that there is concern about, about the anonymity of voting. But we're not voting against one person if we vote for another person. So I just throw that out there too.
I concur with that. Okay. So Karen will get back to us in May, and then we will vote in June.
Sounds good.
And so Julie, while you're up next for work plan and membership.
I don't have any updates on membership for this meeting, and I don't believe we have any significant updates for work plan, but I will cede to Tim for that. Tim, do you have any specific updates on work plan?
No, I think we just took the suggestions that were given to us last time, and we've kind of got an outline for the year. And as things come up, if speakers can't make it, or if there's something else that comes up, we can adjust it. But I think after the last meeting that we had a lot of good input, and I just went ahead and provided that to Tanika.
Thank you.
Membership subcommittee.
I'm sorry.
Hush, John. I just wanted to say that for the membership subcommittee that I fully anticipate that I will be submitting my resignation probably the June meeting. That I'm looking at selling and moving to Florida. So I don't think it would be right for me to be serving on this Human Rights Committee for Virginia if I do that. So just to FYI.
You are going to be you're going to be sorely missed.
I'm just
devastating
someplace
news.
that I'm not going to deal with these allergies.
Okay, I got you.
So we're not accepting the resignation.
No,
letter.
we say
Sorry.
no, Sandy.
No.
You can submit it, but that's okay.
Are there any
Andy,
particular?
sorry, they have pollen in Florida.
And alligators.
Julie, are there any particular issues with recruiting?
So so I think we need to revisit who we have. So the last person that had applied currently works for DBHCS, so they were not eligible. So I do think we need to sort of revisit, filling Sandy's role, right, and then also jurisdiction. So I'll reach out with to Tanika and Clee to see if we have any people in the pipelines for membership, and I would encourage this committee, right, to share that there's an anticipated vacancy. So well, more to come on that, but hopefully we'll. So Sandy, just for planning purposes, you'll submit your resignation in June, and when do you think it might be effective? You want to think about it?
I really anticipate my house selling in May.
Oh,
so
sooner rather than later. Okay, all right. So, okay, we'll work.
I have a lovely home at Lake Gaston. If anyone's interested, and it goes on the market in a week and a half.
Okay.
If you're not interested but want to come and help me clean, that would be welcome as well.
Noted. Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
And
So
then
we'll
I
make
was
some inquiries then.
here as a provider.
Thank you.
That's how I came onto.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. LHRC reporting. Any of the members attended by Zoom any LHRC meetings?
Yes, John, I did. I attended Southwestern Virginia Mental Health Institute on March 9th with Brandon. I did that.
Did you?
I'll send in a report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other, Tanika, I don't have anything.
You're right, there are no requests for membership. David, how was the meeting? It was almost like
It was fun. It was
went.
fun. It's always good to see those people, and it was fun. Of course, when they went into business, then I left. But it was a rather short. Brandon was there. And I requested it a couple of days before, and he sent me the link, and it was no problem. Sitting where I am right now today, I was only maybe 2 miles away from the facility, but it was a fine meeting. Those are good members. They're seasoned members. They're all good. They really have their hearts in the right place.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? If not, we will adjourn. The next meeting is May 20th. It will be at Sandy's house in Florida.
With gators in the backyard.
Worth it.
Everybody take care, stay healthy, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get together.
Very good. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
By the way,
Bye.
yeah.